and I could hear whispering next to me right on this side. And I didn't know what they said. I couldn't discern any words or anything, but I could definitely tell it was two women that were whispering to each other. And very slowly, I opened my eyes, and the taller woman was the one that was over me, and she had her hands on me, and those were the hot spots. And the shorter woman, she was like kind of more next to my head. And that was when I wanted to be like, get away from me. I wanted to scoot. I wanted to move. And there was nothing. There was no movement. There's no sound. There was nothing.
The Codega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his Codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Codega and sharing one of yours. In 2017, in the quiet suburbs of Kansas, it started like it always does, with a feeling, that heavy, crawling sensation on the back of your neck, like someone's watching. At first, Emily chalked it up to stress, maybe her mind playing tricks on her, but then the shadows in her room started acting differently. It wasn't just the usual flicker of light through the blinds. No, these shadows moved, and one in particular seemed to linger. One night, as she lay in bed scrolling through her phone, the air in the room suddenly felt thick, almost electric. A chill ran down her spine, and before she could even react, she saw him. A tall, dark figure stood at the foot of her bed. No eyes, no mouth, just a void where a face should be. But somehow she knew it was staring right at her. And the worst part, it felt deliberate, like it wanted her to know it was there. Panic surged through her, but she couldn't move, couldn't scream, just watched helpless as the shadow loomed over her. Its wide-brimmed hat and long coat making it look almost human, but it wasn't. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. The next morning, Emily told herself it was just a dream, a weird case of sleep paralysis, but deep down she knew better. And when she started searching online, she was stunned to find thousands of others who had seen him too. Some say the Hat Man is a watcher, others say he's a warning. But for Emily and so many others, the questions remain the same. Who is he? And why does he come? Welcome back to Codega's Codex of Curiosities. I'm Ride, the Codega, and tonight we're stepping into the shadows. You've heard the stories. You may have even seen them yourselves. Dark figures at the edge of your vision, presence at the corner of the room when you know you're alone. Some call them shadow people. Others believe there's something more. Our guest tonight knows this fear all too well. They lived with it, faced it, and come out on the other side with a perspective that just might change the way you see it yourself. Are shadow people just tricks of the mind, or are they something else entirely? We're going to find out tonight, and we're going to bring on our guest, Audrey. So, Audrey, welcome to Codega's Codex of Curiosities.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks. I'm very honored to have you on here, Audrey. And, we stumbled upon each other, I believe it was on Reddit, and it was fantastic that you reached out to me. And from there, here we are. And we're going to get into this. And your story is about the Hat Man, but we're not going to say any more. But before we go too far, if you want to tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about yourself and maybe where they can find you if you want.
Well, I am currently in New Mexico, which is a very interesting place for me to kind of land. It was never planned. Um, Most of all of this happened in Colorado when I still lived up there. And right now, I'm a full-time artist and stay-at-home mom to my 4-year-old, and my husband works in tech. So we're just a couple of, from the outside, normal people. And it just, these are just things that have happened. I know, other people that I've talked to on a very rare occasion. My husband and I talk about, spiritual things, and, we really get along and all of this. And he has heard all of these stories. He's kind of the only one who's heard most of these stories.
Until now.
Uh, yeah, exactly. Because you get a lot of that, huh, kind of thing back at you. And I did want to kind of do a little disclaimer that just recently, about a year ago, I was diagnosed with autism. So a lot of that, these stories and these experiences and things, I kept very close to the vest because everything in my life was about appearing normal, uh, neurotypical, I guess would be the word now. But back then, it was all about, presenting that face that made me so much more acceptable. And so these stories, for a long time, growing up and everything like that, they were dreams. They were always presented as dreams. And then when I turned 28, they became much more than dreams. And it kind of started me off on this whole other journey I never even kind of thought, never looked for. And now it's a central part of my life. Now it's really turned me into who I am, and I'm extremely grateful that these things have happened. As much as most people I've talked to are like, hate it. Uh, I'm like, if I hadn't had it, I wouldn't be where I'm at, and I'm really thrilled to be where I am. So,
I could not agree more with you with these occurrences. As some people would look at me and say, that stuff that you went through, I wouldn't want that. I'm like, well, I understand that, but it directed me, and it created who I am today because I went on a path that wouldn't have happened if I'd never had these experiences as well, same as yourself. So I completely understand that point of view that you're saying. It really shaped and directed my life into a different way, and I'm okay with that. I'm made the best of it, and here I am. So
yeah.
Audrey, let's start this. Where does the story start? Is that at 28 years old, or is there something before that?
Well, um, I can say that I was aware of other things that had kind of happened to me. When I was little, I would see like blue orbs that happened quite a bit. I was really, really close with my grandfather. So he was my favorite person, and he passed away when I was 4. And I dreamt about him the night that before he passed away. And when I woke up in the morning, I told my mom, um, Grandpa's gone. And she's like, huh? And so, things like that. And then when I was 8, I saw him again. I was really having these nightmares. And so I would see kind of this blue outline of him kind of just hanging out. And I always just felt, ah, Grandpa's here. Thank God. Like, we're all protected. Everything's cool. Like, as long as he's here, then we're good, kind of thing. So, lots of stories like that. I mean, that could be a whole entire other show of that kind of thing. And I have been told that if I so wished to open the door, I could get into like doing medium stuff and all of that. But some of those experiences have been a little much. And then once I had my son, back burner, all about the baby. So,
I understand completely with that one. Yeah, it's
yeah,
not for
yeah.
now.
So,
Yeah.
um, as far as shadow people went, 28 was where it started. That was the trigger. I was living in Aurora, up in Denver, in Colorado, and I was in this. I'll give you the layout a little bit, just because it helps with the context. I was in this town home. It was a little place, 750 square feet. Two of us living there, me and my ex-husband, and you walk in, living room, and led to a kitchen, and then on the right was this staircase that led upstairs to, it was a loft, so it was open to the living room downstairs. But if you went up the stairs and you turned to the right, the bed was right there. So if that makes sense. So
Yes, it
all
does.
you need to know, landing, stairs, bed, right? Because that's where most of this took place, was on that landing. And the first time I wrote about it, I was showing my plethora of journals over here. The first time I really made note of it and wrote about it, uh, sleeping any other normal night, and then I woke up and the room was warm. And something that is very specific to me is that I love sleeping cold. Like in the winter, I will leave the windows open because it has to be free. If you can see your breath, it's the right temperature to be sleeping.
A little too cold
So,
for me, but I can relate with it being cool. I like it when it's colder when I'm sleeping.
yeah, exactly. I don't know. Maybe I used to be a husky or something. I don't know. So, um, when I woke up and it was really warm, that was the first thing that hit me was like, who's been messing with my thermostat? Like I was a little miffed. So I sat up, and at the end of my bed were three figures that night. So on the landing was tall, probably about 6'5", I want to say. But it's kind of hard to tell because there's like a stair down to the landing. So, and there was a very distinctive brim of a hat, and he was all in shadow. And I thought, it's nighttime. There are no lights on. It must just be because the only window was down the hall towards the bathroom. So, oh my God, there's someone in my house kind of thing was my first reaction. But at the very end of my bed, there was this figure. I can't say it was distinctly female in like shape, still same shape. Um, but I got female from it. And next to her was a shorter female, probably about 4 foot. Uh, and we all kind of just sat there. And I assumed they were staring at me, and I was staring at them. And I was scared. I was like, there's someone in our house, but there was something that I didn't scream or anything like that. And it wasn't necessarily paralysis, not that time. It was just curiosity of like, yeah, like, what do you want? And we sat there, and it could have been 5 seconds, it could have been 10 hours. I cannot tell you. And
I can relate to that completely when I
yeah,
had my experience. I
okay.
don't know how long it was for.
Hmm.
I assume it was a second or 5 or 10 seconds. I don't know, but it seemed to be forever almost in a way as well.
Right. And then when you kind of remember it, for me, memories are all emotion. Like I get some images with it, but everything is very emotion based. So uh, I'm already going to have to give you a heads up. A lot of these shadow people and memories are extreme emotion. So if I like right now, I'm kind of, that first encounter, you get those shakes.
And and
Um,
and what kind of emotion was that pulling out of you?
well, when it first hit, it was fear, and then it was kind of curiosity, and then I could feel from the taller female, I could feel her kind of pulling, like kind of energy sight, like the first thing that comes to mind is like Harry with the Dementors, where you could see that like sucking
Yes.
energy, like it felt like that.
Okay.
Um, and she was kind of like forcing this calm at me, and that made me mad. And I let her know. I was like, "Hey, like, I get this is weird, but you can't control how I feel about this." And right when I thought that, it stopped. And it was like, "Okay, we're listening," kind of thing. And I kind of felt like from the beginning, I felt a little bit of a respect between me and the ladies kind of thing. We kind of had a little bit of a rapport. So that went on for a little bit, and then, after a while, I was like, I have to go to the bathroom. I cannot wait any longer. And so as I started to stand up, um, motion with them, it's not like you really see them move. It's not like a glide or a step or anything, but there is definitely kind of this, like a shaking that happens. They don't just like are there and then they disappear. It was like kind of this fading sort of thing. So they started to shake, and I did want to turn my back to them. And then after, I got 2 steps, and they shook and they were gone.
So like almost like a static, like they're like phasing out. Actually, would be the best way for you to
Yes,
describe that,
yes.
maybe.
That would be the closest word I can find. Um, and when I got back in bed, I took a note of the time that it was 2:30. So I was like, okay, we sat there staring at each other till, from probably about 2 to 2:30 kind of thing was my feeling. Um, and then the
Now,
next
just
time,
before we go too far with that,
yes,
do you feel that it was the full half hour, or was there possibly, because some people say this, that they have some lost time as well? Do you feel that it was the full half hour, or was there any time that you're like, maybe I'm not 100% sure if I was sitting there for that full half hour?
yeah, well, it was kind of the assumption.
Okay.
Like there was, how you kind of feel like, I feel like a half an hour has gone by,
Okay. Yeah.
like that internal clock kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the reason why I go to that is because in later experiences, every time they showed up, I would look at the clock, 2 o'clock on the dot, every time. So that's why now, you go back and you kind of insert things and piece it together but I can't say exactly for sure when it really began that first time. Um, the next time was one of the most intense. We were talking about, paralysis and stuff, and that has only happened 2 times, and that was the first time it happened. And that one was like I was asleep, but sometimes you can like feel yourself like it pulled up into your body instead of just like being asleep and then being awake. You feel that kind of movement. And I felt that. And as I was coming up, I could feel this hot, like burning hot sensation on my back, right between my shoulder blades. And then the other one was on my lower abdomen, like just below my belly button. And I could hear whispering next to me, right on this side. And I didn't know what they said. I couldn't discern any words or anything, but I could definitely tell it was two women that were whispering to each other. And very slowly, I opened my eyes, and the taller woman was the one that was over me, and she had her hands on me, and those were the hot spots. And the shorter woman, she was like kind of more next to my head. And that was when I wanted to be like, get away from me. I wanted to scoot. I wanted to move. And there was nothing. There was no movement. There's no sound. There was nothing. And I think,
And these two, do you believe that they were the same from the prior experience as well?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
they were definitely like the same height, same kind of build, like form, I guess. Um, but they did feel kind of familiar from that. And I think the only thing that really gave me away was I was trying to, get breath to scream and be like, don't touch me. And so I heard a from myself. And when I gasped like that, the shorter one, she goes, shh, put her hand on my eyes, and I was out. And that was it. I don't remember anything else that night. And I didn't wake up until like 10 o'clock the next morning. I was late for work. So that time I started freaking out.
Of
That
course.
was
Of course.
that was when I told my husband at the time, I told him everything that had happened. I was like, if this happens to me again, I need you awake. If I hit you or anything, I need you to respond. So that was the first time that really
Now,
became like an
did you
awareness.
did you check to see if there was anything on your back or on your abdomen after the fact?
No, there was no bruising or anything like that. But I will say that probably about 3 months before that, um, I had my appendix out. And I'd been really struggling, at this is another one of those like at the time, if I had known I was autistic, I would have given more direction about the medications that were used because our nervous system can be wired a little different and the medications can affect us differently. So whatever anesthesia they had used really did not compute with my body. And I had a really hard time kind of getting back to a place of feeling normal after that. But after that night, I started noticing I felt like myself.
Oh, really?
So that was the first time that I was like, was I hurt or was I helped? And that was the first time that kind of went through my head instead of just fear. And then,
And the fear then could have been because of the unknown. Like there's these people in there, though they seem to be helping you. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So that was when I sat at the foot of my bed when I woke up, and I kind of just, I didn't know if I was talking to myself or what, I kind of just gave a rundown. Like, okay, I don't know what you are. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want, but touching me, no, we're not doing this. There's a boundary, there's a line. I don't care. That's not happening. So then after that, for probably a good 3 or 4 months, um, at least twice a week, up to maybe even 5 times a week, I would get just the Hat Man, and he would be on the landing of the stairs. He never touched me. He never moved. He never, nothing. And it was just this thing where I would like snap awake and he would be there and we'd be like, like I would feel like I would just kind of sit there and I'd be like, how's it going? Like it got to this point where I would try to kind of conversate with him because it was like, what is happening? And probably, as we're getting into the third month of this, I'm like, I'm just so tired of being quiet. I am so tired of being scared that, you know what? This isn't happening. And I told him, I said, you are freaking me out, and I hate it. You are not letting me sleep. You are not letting me dream. You're not letting me actually rest. So I don't know why you're here, but you need to quit. And I kind of just, I wasn't a mom at that point, but I used the mom voice, like
Yeah.
what I was.
You laid down the law.
So I had told you that there were 4 really big events with him. The first one with him that made me kind of start seeing him differently was the next time he showed up. I snapped to. I was like, okay, the room is hot, so I know he's there. I look down at the landing, nothing. I'm like, okay, so I'm kind of like looking around the room and nothing. And I look a little harder and I see he's like this, like the wall of the landing is there, and all I can see is like half, and like the brim of his hat right here. And it was like, he's here to watch me, but he's like trying not to freak me out, was kind of the thing that I took away from that, where it was like, oh, he's got a job to do. And me sending him away isn't really an option. Um, so yeah, that went on for a few months, and then I started getting the 3 of them a couple of times, and then just randomly, there was a short one, really, really like, I'm talking like smaller than a hobbit. Like he's like under 3 feet tall, very short guy, um, but he was really wide. And the first time he showed up, he was with everybody, and I kind of just included him in whatever. And then the next time he showed up, he was by himself. And he did this thing, like I said, it wasn't really like a movement, but he receded back from me and he went on the wall. And as he hit the wall, he just grew and grew. And as he grew, I felt like prey, like I was being hunted. And like that was the second time with the paralysis where like I don't know if it was just like that fight or flight or freeze. I was just like just the pure terror. And I could see him going up the wall and onto the ceiling, and I just had this feeling that if he got to the ceiling, he was going to drop onto me and just smother me like a heavy blanket. And that was when I managed to and that was the only time I had tried to wake up my ex at that time, and before, but he always slept through it. And that time he woke up
Ooh,
and he
that's
saw
interesting.
me. Yeah, he saw me laying there, and he said I was just crying. Like there was just tears just streaming. And he grabbed me, and as soon as he touched me, I could move. And he's like, "What's wrong? What's going on?" Like he
You're
was,
like above.
he was, yeah, exactly, ultra panic. So he got up, he turned on all the lights, and nothing there, of
Hmm.
course,
Of
because
course.
they got to make you look as crazy as possible. So um, he switched sides of the bed with me, and after that was when I started like um, going to my mom and being like, "Hey, mom, Have you ever experienced anything weird kind of thing? Because I couldn't, after being forced to be silent like that, I realized I couldn't be silent about it anymore. Um,
You needed someone to talk to, you know.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. And, journaling, good in some ways, but I needed some sort of opinion. So yeah, it was at that point that I started talking to people. And it had been about a year since I had first seen them that it finally got to a point where I was like, okay, I can't do this by myself, clearly. And so I started talking about it, and people just started appearing in my life. I didn't like go online and like research like white witch or exorcism or like I had kind of glanced online and seen that there were these big websites that had these databases of stories and things like that. And reading the stories just made it so much worse. Huh. I was like, they're like,
Did it make it worse because it made it real because other people are experiencing this as well?
that was a big part of it. Yeah. Kind of the verification of, okay, this isn't a dream, that I'm actually experiencing something here. But it was also, it was always, oh, he's here for malice. Oh, he had fangs. Oh, he had the glowing red eyes. Oh, and very valid. You know, I don't discount any experience that anyone has had in any way, shape, or form. And, my shadow people could be a totally different thing. He could be the same thing. I really, no verification and no judgments. These are just the things that I kind of went through. Um, so at that point, when I started talking about it, I was working as a karaoke DJ. I had left working in an office because, you know, social office stuff did not work well with me. Uh, so um, I kind of moved on from that, and I was working as a karaoke DJ. So I was meeting all kinds of characters and all kinds of people. And there was a regular who was coming in, and um, he just randomly started telling me like ghost stories. And I was like, hello, we need to talk.
Some guy coming in off the street having ghost stories, and it happens.
Right.
Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. He kind of just showed up, and he told me about this place called Herbs and Arts, which is, the local woo woo shop, is what we called it there in Denver. And so I went in there, and I told the lady, like, I walked in and I was looking through the books, and this woman kind of just appeared, and she's like, hello, you've never been here. And I'm like, yes, this is really creepy, like from a movie, she was just kind of, and she's like, you need a clearing. Can I come clear you? I was like, oh, yes, that would be amazing. And so I started talking to her about, bonds and connections, and I'm seeing these things. And she's like, okay, here's a pouch. You put this under your pillow, you sleep with it, and, all of this different stuff. And she did this big clearing of smoke and, all of this stuff. And I thought, well, for sure, this is going to work. And that night, all of them showed up. And I was like, well, dang it. Okay. So I kind of kept an open mind, and a couple days go by, and I meet this woman at karaoke, and she has a pentagram tattooed like up on her chest. And I was like, "Ooh, what is this?" I was kind of talking to her, and she's like, "Well, I consider myself a white witch and all of that." She goes, "One of my specialties is exorcism." And I'm like, "Let me tell you a story." So she comes to my house. We do this whole big exorcism thing. We sage the place, we do the smoke, we do the bowls, we do, the whole thing. And there was a moment we got to the top of the stairs, and we were pushing them out of the window. And I felt like a little child, about the size, the height of like a 4-year-old, wrap their arms around my hips and my back. And we're like, get out, get out, get out, get out. And they were hanging on. Like, it was like tug of war. She was pulling, and I was like jerking around. And it was totally, that was a moment where I was like, okay, I can't really be a skeptic about this anymore. I can't say I've dreamt this. I can't say. And the next day I did have bruises from that around my hips and on my low back. And I thought, for sure,
That's
We
it.
did it. We got it.
Exactly.
We nailed it. And 2 days later, they were all back. And so by that point, I had, I've always worked kind of multiple jobs interchangeably, and I had taken a job at a theater, just a little tiny theater there in the heart of Denver. And my coworker there, just randomly one night, he starts telling me ghost stories. People are just saying these things to me. I'm not inciting it. I'm not pushing. I'm not saying anything. And he tells me that he has been doing spiritual walks and things since he was a child, and some people have called him a shaman, and this kind of thing. And I'm thinking, oh well, maybe if we go from the natural side of things, we can see. So I start telling him about my story, and he said, well, considering all of the things you've tried and they haven't worked, I would really like to do a walk and speak with your hat man. I was like, okay, sure, we can try that. And whew, okay, this one kind of gets me a little teary. So
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
this is the second big experience with him that really changed a whole bunch of not only my relationship with him, but things about my life in general. Um, so we went to his house, and he had kind of like this sacred room where he would do these things, and he started burning the incense, and we did the drums and kind of got into this really deep meditation. No drugs or anything were involved. And after about 45 minutes, he just kind of dips. And I just sit and I wait. And he tilts his head up and he smiles. And I'm like, is it you or you possess? I don't really know what to think of the whole thing. And he said that he met my hat man and they had talked. And while he was not really effusive, um, he did say that he came to me when I was 3 years old, and my parents were getting divorced. And it had been a really hard marriage. He had been abusive. He had been really, I didn't really like the guy. But when it was finally separated, I didn't know what to do without him. And we had moved in with my grandparents, and um, he said that there was a night where I was awake, sitting in the middle of the bed, and my pain called to him. And that was when he came, and he had never left. And he came to me because he knew I needed a father. And he knew there were no humans on the aspect line, so he wanted to be there for me. I was like, oh, okay.
That is deep. Wow.
He had no idea what to think of that. And the thought that I had so much pain as a 3-year-old that it could call something to me, that was terrifying and exciting, and lot of feelings with that. And so I went to my mom and I told her what happened, and she said, oh, is this the man that was guarding the bathroom? And I'm like, what in the what now? And she said, there's this big long hallway in Grandma and Grandpa's house. At the end of the hallway was the bathroom. And if you turned, there was the stairs down to the basement where we lived. And you'd have to go up the stairs to get to the bathroom. And she said there was a good probably 6 months where I wouldn't go to the bathroom by myself because there was a big man in the shadows in front of the bathroom. And I'm like, are you kidding? You better not be joking or anything. And she goes, no, look at this. And she shows me her journals. And there's her outline of this man with this white brim hat in like this trench coat. And next to it was, "This is what Audrey tells me she sees me every night." And just chills. And just, I couldn't believe it. I was totally, in that moment, I was grateful, started kind of replacing that terror. Um, and there was, the shaman had said that after he saw how much he scared me, he retreated and just came to me in my dreams. And my dream journal is full of them. Oh, I saw him again. Oh, yeah, I'm having these nightmares. Oh, whatever. And then there was a night where I was putting together my demo reel for a post-production house. And I came across I had a creative writing class in film school that was to do a little video about a dream we had. And there he was, played my boyfriend in college. He was there in the hat and the trench coat, and he's chasing me down the beach. And I run into this bathroom, and he pins me against the wall in the bathroom, and he leans to my ear, and he says, "I am your redeemer." And then I wake up. And I'd totally forgotten this film. I told you it was just an assignment, but there he was. I'm like, okay. That is really, you know, I didn't know what to do with that. So the next time that I worked with my shaman man, um, I told him everything that had happened. And, we went back to his house. We watched the movie. He read the journal entries and everything. And he said, "You know what this makes me think of? Have you heard of Matt Kahn?" And I said, "Nope, no idea." Um, I didn't look into, I was raised in the Christian church, really into it until 14, and then you get a little disillusioned and then kind of separated myself from all of that stuff. So I hadn't really been looking into spirituality or anything. And he said, "Well, people call him a spiritual teacher, but he has this video that he just came out with called Dealing with Your Own Shadow." And I'm like, "Oh,
Kind of
what a
ironic, yeah.
right. What a coincidence that he just came out with that." So, um, I watched the video, and from the very first word, it was like he was talking right to my soul. Like, it just, something about his voice just totally opened this thing in me. And I was like, wow, that was really powerful. But at the time, I'm like, oh, yeah, whatever. It's just this YouTube channel. Whatever. I'm just kind of getting into this YouTube channel. But inside, I'm like, this is something huge. And at that time, Matt was, he's the I love you guy. You sit and you take care of your inner child, and I love you, I love you, I love you. And so I really, really put myself into all of that. And as things were coming up, I would say, "Oh, hello, I see you. I love you. I release you back to your source with nothing but blessings and love." And as I started doing this work, the next time that I saw all of them together, the short man is like this. He's vibrating, he's phasing, right? And the others are still solid, but he's doing this. And I'm like, interesting. And the next time they show up, he's gone. It's just the three of them. I'm like, oh, okay. So with that time, I really sat and I focused on the little one, the little woman. And I was like, "Why are you here?" And I started asking her directed questions. And I never got, like telepathy or, it was more of this kind of wave of being afraid of leaving. And I realized, oh, she's abandonment. She's the one that, has been around since I was little. That's why she's so little. And so I really worked on that and really worked on that. And about a month later, she was gone. And same thing with the taller woman, um, ended up being my acceptance of myself and kind of my femininity instead of, being told what I am as a woman and trying to fit in. I really started finding that solidly for myself. And as I did that and defined what it meant for me to be a woman, she started shaking. So I knew I was on the right track. And
Interesting.
this was a process of about a year. So they've been around regularly, at least weekly, every night, or not every night, but most nights, for about 2 years at this point. And then once the others went away, there's the Hat Man. There's nothing I can do to budge him. There's no phasing, there's no shaking, and it started getting to be the thing where he's there every night, every night. And I'm like, dude, I gotta sleep. Like, you gotta give me a break. I'm just too tired to be scared anymore. It's not really that I would still get the heat of the room. And there was two different occasions where he's usually facing me, but he was kind of like to the side, and I could tell he was turned. And the times that he was turned, his eyes were yellow. And I was like, okay, I don't know. Then the question became, is there more than one? Do they just kind of look the same? He's silhouette, you know? Um, so I got told by my friend who had done the journey with me that Matt was coming to Denver.
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
was like, ooh, never meet your heroes. Bad idea. I was just so sure.
I agree to that. Yes.
Right. Right. I was so sure that I was going to get there and he was going to be like, give me all your money, or I just was really worried about the whole thing, but I was very excited. And so he would do, at that time, he would do different things where it was like a weekend thing. The Friday night was like a 4 hour talk. And then he would do Saturday and Sunday would be 6 hour days. And, that was it wasn't like a retreat. He would just come to town and talk. And I thought, well, at minimal, it'll be a good motivational speech,
True.
whatever.
True.
And everybody was so worried about me that my mom, my dad, my brother, and his girlfriend, and my grandma all came with me that first night to see Matt because they were all sitting there going, she's joining a cult. They were all so sure that I had, that no one had actively said, maybe we should, check you in somewhere. But it was subtle things like that that kind of gave me the clue of like, okay, maybe I'm not as stable as I think I am here. But I felt like I was. I didn't feel like I was, losing it. But that's what you see in the movies. No crazy people call themselves crazy.
Yeah. So true. So true.
Right, right. So when it gets into that determination of, is this real? Is this not? Um, and from my mom's point of view, she's an astrophysicist. It's
Oh,
her degrees and
wow.
all of that.
Okay. There we go.
So, she had already started asking those, like, have you been losing time? Are there bright lights? Do you feel levitated? Do you have lumps anywhere? She's like making sure she's like taking me to the doctor, doing x-rays on different things. And I'm like, Mom, it's a cyst. It's not, it's not a chip,
It's not an
so there was,
implant, Mom. It's not an implant. I swear.
right. So, when we talk about those things, I have checked for them.
Oh,
That's
excellent. Yes,
never
because I
been.
know in the beginning, yeah, before the interview, we did talk a little bit about abduction. That was something
Yeah.
that I brought up. But
Yeah. And those are things like in retrospect, those times when when she covered my face and I was out. Like, hmm, that one makes me I think about that one a lot of like, what else were they doing there? Why did they need me out? That kind of thing. And it felt like I was really struggling to stay awake. So, um, it it comes into question of like, were they fading because of the work that I was doing on myself, where like they represented that emotion and that's why it like faded away? Or they were showing up to get me to do that work.
Could
and
be. Or
they
because you were
left.
doing that work, you cut off ties to them as well.
Yeah,
It wasn't that you were solving that problem, you were growing. There's many ways we can look at it. I think there's many
right.
ways.
Yeah, and maybe it was just, my little eye was starting to peek open there, and I was seeing above that frequency that, because I think, I love animals. It's one of my special interests. And so I think about the mantis shrimp all the time, who has, you know, they've got like so many more pupils than us, and we know that they can see ultraviolet and infrared, and those are just the things we can verify. We know that they can see more than that. So I think about that a lot. I'll be like, am I a mantis shrimp? Like, am I gaining my powers? That would be so cool if that was my spirit animal. So, those are
That's
definitely
the first
questions
time I
that
heard
came up.
anybody, mention the mantis shrimp as their spirit animal. But
Well, they
that's
also have the
fantastic. Yeah,
strongest punch in the world. Like,
they
that's so cool. Like,
they do. Yes,
if you're gonna be powerful and own yourself, like you want that punch. Like, yeah, create your own light vortex. Like, all right, man.
there we go.
Um, so, um, okay, where were we? Sorry. Um,
Yes,
First night of Matt. So I actually ended up running into Matt. I got there, like 3 hours early. I was so excited. And of course, the place was still closed. I couldn't even go in and sit down. So I was like, I'm going to go to the deli and get this sandwich. And I go into the deli and I look over and he's sitting at one of the tables. And I'm like, immediately, like, I
everything
had,
happens for a reason. You're
right.
saying like these people coming in. This is yeah.
Exactly. And it's so funny because, I lived in LA and I had met all kinds of celebrity. I worked in a post house. They would all come to do their voiceovers and stuff. And, I won't name drop, but, some A-list people. And I was always like, yeah, here's your coffee, whatever, like big deal. And it never affected me. And there was Matt. And I was like, it's like meeting the Beatles. Like, I was just so over the moon. And he turns and he sees me. And I'm sure I was just standing there like, you know, and he turns and he waves. And I'm like, and he gets up, walks across the room, and he goes, "Hi." And I go, "I came here to see you." And he goes, "I came here to see you too." And my heart just exploded. He sat and he talked and he gave me a little hug and he goes, "Okay, well, I gotta go." He's like, "Are you gonna be at the talk tonight?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And he goes, "Okay, I'm gonna see you." And I'm like, "Okay, that sounds great." And I didn't end up eating. I was so excited. I couldn't even eat after that. Um, so I got there and we got in line and we sit down and he starts talking. And immediately the room just thick fog was just instantaneously like was in the middle of an Irish bog at midnight. Like it was so thick, it was like you could put your hand into it and the handprint would stick. And I was just, kind of looking around and he's there and he's clear and he's kind of in this golden, almost like purple weaved in light on the stage. And I turn and see my hat man. This is experience number 3, standing by the stage. And I had never visibly really seen him move, but he turns and looks up. And so I follow his gaze and look up. I've only ever told this to my husband now. So there above Matt is this woman. And she's not like a giant or anything, but she fills the space. And she's not solid, but she's in this kind of golden outline. And she has this big, long hair, and it's like she's in water. Her dress is floating, her hair is up. And I just feel I know her. And we're just made for each other. And she smiles and reaches her hand out. And all of a sudden the talk is over and everyone's leaving. And I'm like, and the room is clear. And I'm like, what's going on? And I look at my lap and it's filled with tissues. And I'm just been crying. My mom said that I was sobbing all 4 hours of the talk.
So
And
let me get this straight. So when did that event kind of happen that the Hat Man looked up and you saw this woman,
mhm.
floating there? Was that more in the beginning?
No, this was um a little over 2 years since the first time that they
No,
had
no, no,
appeared
no.
to me.
Sorry, no, that I understand. But I
Oh,
mean, like in the talk itself, was that at the beginning of the talk that you noticed the woman floating over top, or
yeah. So within the first 10 minutes, the fog was there. And then I would say probably not 5 minutes after that, I saw the Hat Man. And then, obviously time was not, it was not a thing after
and
that.
then next thing you know, it's 4 hours.
hmm And I have no idea any of the things he said. I have
You're
no
like, I came
idea.
here for the talk and I missed the talk. What was the talk?
Like, yeah.
What's
And
the
at that time,
talk?
we were really poor, really strapped for cash. And I was like, dang, my $60. That was I had had this immense experience, and I was like, "Oh, my $60." Like, the silly things we care about in that moment. And then afterwards, Matt would stand next to the stage, and he would talk to every single person that would line up. He would be there for hours. Whoever wanted to talk to him would come up, and they would have, 2, 3 minutes with him, and then shake his hand, give a hug, and go. And I walked up to him, and he goes, "Who did you see?" And he knew. I mean, I'm sure the clues were there that I'm sobbing and I'm staring above him. I'm sure there was whatever he experienced. He goes, he's like, "You don't have to tell me, but were they awesome?" I'm like, "Oh, they were." She was so beautiful. He's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Are you coming the next 2 days?" And I'm like, "Hell yes." Hell yes, I am coming the next 2 days. And after that, my hat man wasn't there as much. Um, the solid sightings of him started further in between. And I would get this feeling like even during the day, in the middle of the day, I would get like a wave of heat, kind of like a hot flash kind of thing, where I just get it rush up my body with tingles and it would like come out the top of my head. And I would kind of see in the corner of my eye just, a shadow that shouldn't be a shadow sort of thing. Um, and I'd say hello, and it would be gone. And I was like, okay, okay, interesting. And we were in Denver for a, about 6 more months, and then we decided to move down to Durango. And with the sale of the townhome, um, my ex was like, do whatever you want with it. And I was like, I want to retreat with Matt. I want a solid week trapped in a room with him. I don't care what happens. And I was so just fully open of being like, I don't know who she was. She was there for me. And I knew it. And I booked the next retreat they had, and that was up in Portland, Oregon. And you would take like this train from the city center out to the wildlife refuge that was there by the zoo. And so you would take the train back and forth. And on the second day we were there, um, I do give a little disclaimer here because I have been to Matt retreats after this. I've been to like 7 more of his talks that were just weekend things. I've really like he just speaks to my soul, and I love being in that environment with him. And yeah, so not necessarily like obsessive, I want to be clear about that, but like definitely when I feel like I need kind of a recharge. But this one was like the one that blew up everything was that first time going. And this day, it never happened after that, but there was a man who, in the middle of him talking, he stood up and just started yelling at Matt, like accusing him of all of these things and just cursing him out. And Matt just very calmly sat and he listened and he said, okay, that's enough. And the guy goes, that was it. And Matt said, he needs our help. We need to kind of bring him back down into his body, bring him back down from wherever he is. And can everyone just kind of sit with me? And he called, he started, he does these repeat after me's back and forth. So he did a couple of repeat after me's, just talking about the man and how he was welcome and how he was loved and how everything here was a safe space. And that's okay. And it was like the room just got brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. And then Matt took all of that light and then just sighed, and the light kind of waved over everyone. And the guy goes, ah, and just sits down. And I thought for sure he was going to be kicked out. I thought, oh, that's the end of the retreat, and it was like, all right, that's a good place to break for lunch. Like it was a totally like, and I'm like, okay, and there's probably about 150 of us there at that retreat. And so I'm like, okay, that was a crazy experience. And I've been getting told about these food trucks in the center of town. I'm like, I'm going to go get myself a Philly cheesesteak from one of those trucks. That's all I wanted. That's all I thought about. And I'm sitting on the train back into town and I'm looking around and everything is so bright. The corners of my eyes, everything is just open and then it goes on and on and on. And I'm like, what is different? What is going on? And I start realizing how alone I am. And then it clicks. My hat man hasn't really left since the first time I saw Matt in Denver. And I start shaking. And I feel like bunny rabbit in the middle of a fox den, like totally exposed. And I start just crying. I'm like freaking out. And I stay on the train and go right back to the Wild Center. And I find this dark little corner in the convention center. And I just sit there and I just rock. And I have this full on meltdown. And no one sees me. No one, I made sure to hide myself really well. And I hear people starting to come back. And I go back in. And Matt goes, okay, so now we're going to start our Q&A session. He goes, I'm going to look around the room, and if I see you and I don't pick you, don't worry. We've got 3 more days of the retreat. We'll have plenty more options. He goes, I'm just looking for someone whose cookies are done and ready to come out of the oven. And those are the people I'm going to talk to. And he's like, okay, raise your hands. And I was trying my hardest to keep my hands down because I don't talk about this stuff. Not in public. My ex was to the point where he didn't want to hear any of this stuff anymore. I don't cry in public because that makes me weird. I learned that as a kid. If you want to fit in, you don't cry in public. All of that stuff. And I was clearly, like my makeup was gone and my face was all red and blotchy. I'd clearly been sobbing somewhere. And so I'm like sitting there actively trying not to raise my hand and I just feel it. And I'm like, just looking around like, okay.
Maybe he
And
won't
then,
see me still.
yeah, right. Like, oh, he's not going to pick me. This isn't, this isn't real. He's not going to pick me. And in my mind, I hear this high voice say, ding, cookie's done. And he goes and looks right at me. And he goes, you. And I go, oh. And I had gone to the retreat going, whatever happens, happens, and it's gonna be great. And as I'm walking up to the hot seat going, I didn't mean this to happen. I was open to anything, but I didn't mean this.
Anything but this. Yeah.
Exactly. So I sit in the seat and he just looks at me and the whole room seemed to just go dark. And all I could see was Matt. And it's one thing to have him in the videos, and then it's one thing to have him, in his zone with everybody in the room sharing him with 150 other people. And then it's another thing to have um, like being caught in, just a tractor beam and you're just still. And he goes, "What's going on?" And I just, bleh. I say everything. Tell him all about my hat man, tell him all about my experience. I have no idea how long I mean, we've been talking for long enough as it is. I couldn't imagine. And I could hear people like gasping, and I could hear, people like, oh, she's scared, and like all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And
All the judgments, as people are passing judgment upon you.
right. And so as I'm talking to him, I'm like, you're probably going to think I've got some kind of dark entity clinging to me, and I'm some people had said in like comments and all of that stuff, I had really gotten this attachment of I'm an emissary of darkness and there's something wrong. And when I finished, he just smiled and he goes, "Do you miss him?" And I said, "He's my best friend." And at that moment, I realized how much I was sobbing that he was gone and that I had come to this retreat and I made him go away. And that's why I was so upset. And right when I said that, there he was, right on the side of the stage, in the shadows there. And I just was kind of looking at him like, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I made you go away. Please don't go." And Matt said, "He's not going anywhere." He said, "He came to you in your pain, and he's here to help." He goes, "He scares you. We get that. But has he helped you?" And just all of these things, flooding through my head of, would I have found Matt if it wasn't for my shadow man? Would I have discovered all of these things about myself? Would I have moved back to Durango, a place which I really desperately loved? Would I have started becoming the person that I was without the fear and the experience that I had been given? And he said, "At this moment is a time when you can choose to open up your gifts, but just be aware that you've got them. He is there to help you along whatever journey whenever you're ready for it." And he goes, "Don't be scared. You don't have to be scared." And I turned and looked. For the first time of discernible communication back and forth, the only time it's ever happened, he just goes, "I could see that hat dip, the brim." And it felt like I was falling and flying, and the room just exploded in light. I couldn't see anything between all of the sparkles, and my ears popped like I was diving. And all of this weight just, and it was quiet. And I kind of like looked around and I could see everybody. And Matt goes, "Not going to be the same after this, is it?" I'm like, "Oh, sure, Matt, whatever you say. And it wasn't. After that, things have been, there are parts that are harder, but there's this disconnect from the sadness, from any depression, any dark moments that I have. It's more of like an observation of that moment and then a coming back to myself. And I got back from that retreat, and within 2 weeks, the friends that I'd moved to Durango in order to be around were gone. We had been friends for 10 years, but they were my drinking buddies, and they were gone. I didn't push them. I didn't even tell them what happened on the retreat, but they were like, our friendship is just not what it used to be. And they were gone. And about a week after that, my ex goes, "You're on a path that I can't follow." Gone. Within 3 months, we were divorced. The only reason why it took 3 months was because in the state of Colorado, you have to wait 90 days to verify that you actually want to get divorced. But he said that on a Friday. Saturday, he was packed. Sunday, he was back living in Denver. And that Monday, he called to ask for filing of the papers. And I was like, okay, yeah, Matt was right. Nothing's going to be the same after this. And suddenly I was just by myself. And I've had health problems on and off my whole life. And a lot of that was like reproductive things. And at that point, I had already had 2 miscarriages. And I was like, I guess it's never going to happen for me. And 9 months after my ex had left, I was working at Walgreens um, just to make some extra money to move was the plan. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing, but I was like, things will happen. It always just kind of does now. And I started working at Walgreens, and on the first day, my current husband walked in the door, walked up to the photo counter, and I'm like, hi. And he got everything. He clicked with everything. And I showed him Matt, and he goes, this guy's awesome. And it was just, I was planning on moving. And within 3 months, the two of us were living in an apartment together. And a month after that, he proposed, and everybody thought, like, oh, you're crazy. Are you sure? Like, my mom is like doing background checks on him and stuff, like trying to make sure that I'm not making a terrible decision and all of that. And I had an ectopic pregnancy that I had to have surgery for. So I had, pieces of me removed, and they were like, you're never going to have a kid. And I was like, I accept that. Kind of got to that point where I was like, okay, these are the things we're doing. And we planned our wedding, and COVID hit. And we were like, well, I guess we need to cancel the wedding. And the day after we canceled our venue, um, found out I was pregnant. And I was
That's
like, oh,
awesome. That's a
this one,
miracle. Yeah.
right. I was like, this one's not going to stick, whatever. And sure enough, there he was. He was the only guest at our wedding. We still went through with the same date and everything. And now he's this perfect, happy, healthy little 4-year-old boy. And after that conference with Matt, I've seen him solidly. I've seen my hat man solidly. Um, just after my ectopic surgery, I saw him that night in the hospital room. And then the day before my son was born, I saw him that night. And I told my husband, I said, I think the baby's coming early. And sure enough, there he was the next day. Um, and I'll get like those kind of heat waves and I'll get chills and things, but nothing like it used to be. And it's always, hey, bud, glad you're here. You know, like, let me know when the next crazy thing happens.
Fair,
Like,
fair enough. And I know a lot of people listening are going to be like, I can't believe she's friends with the Hat Man, or she's looking up with the Hat Man. But we don't know. We truly don't know. And like you said, when you're researching Hat Man, you're like, oh my gosh, this is like, some people, it's like terrifying experiences. But it
Mhm,
seems that he's been there with you and for you through your whole life. And
mhm,
then it kind of, he's appearing at these very, you know critical times in your life now, like just before, like the surgery, and then the birth of your boy. Like
mhm.
that's that's something that we can't overlook. And a
Yeah.
lot of people, and I will say, a lot of people will overlook those things. And I do say this as a disclaimer on my show, that we have to get by our biases, our previous beliefs on stuff, because we truly don't understand everything that's going on in this world. And
Mhm,
just because majority of the people see one thing as a certain way doesn't mean it's the truth as well, and or at least it's not the truth for you.
yeah. And, there are those parts of me that are like, is he just waiting in the shadows? Like, is there, kind of this sinister, like, oh, he is a shadow, but, you know, once I got over the idea and the perception of like hell is a real place, I really have separated myself from all of that and really see it as more of a control device for religion. Is how I've kind of come to feel about it. Once it stopped being like, oh, they're the demon, like there's the light and there's the dark, and we all exist, and we're all kind of in this continuum. And if we're all one with the light, why wouldn't we also be all one with the dark? If we're all one being is kind of what it's.
The balance.
Yeah. And then I wonder what that influence is, like I'm like, oh, that's exactly what a demon would say. Like
True. True.
you kind of go back and forth on that. But, as an overall, and there are definitely things with my son that now that he's like older and he's talking and stuff, like he'll say things where I'm like, like he's a
I was going to,
900
yeah.
year old 4-year-old is what I call it. Like he's
I was going to ask you about your son. Like, has has he ever come forward and said anything about seeing a shadow figure or anything like that to you?
um not specifically like waking or anything like that, but even from the very beginning, the first 3 months, if I put him down, he cried. I had to sleep sitting up with him. Like there was, and we got him. We went to the pediatrician all the time, and we were always getting him checked. And they're like, no. And once he started talking, we're like, you really need to sleep in your own bed because we were trying to do, sleep training. Total nightmare. Did not work for us, and we tried.
Neither for us as well. Neither for us
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
We tried doing the crib next to the bed. We tried all of these things, and then he just started co-sleeping with us. And once he started being able to articulate, we were like, "Why can't you sleep?" He says, "The dreams come for me there.
The what? Sorry.
The dreams."
Ah.
And so we ask him about the dreams, and some of them are one of the reoccurring ones is like a giant horse with a vacuum is chasing him.
Okay.
That's a unique one. But then there are ones where he said that he is just in a dark room in a spotlight and he can hear the shadows around him.
That's interesting.
And, you want to be like, well, can you elaborate on that? But you also
Yeah.
don't want to,
Yeah.
you don't
You
want to
don't
freak
want
him
it.
out.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So there are definitely things like that. And then he does have this, um, like I was really sick. And the first time that he started talking about this kind of stuff, I was really sick and I was coughing really hard. And he goes, Mom, are you going to die? I was like, no, like it's just a cold. I'll be totally fine. And he's like, oh, okay. And then we were watching AFV, and the challenge was to ask your child if they're going to have a boyfriend or girlfriend in the future. So I was kind of just like playing along, and I was like, are you going to have a girlfriend when you grow up? And he goes, that would be nice. I just don't want to be dead. Okay.
Okay.
Well, we're going to do our best on that. So, just things like that. Both of us were really sick with a fever, and he asked if we were going to die together. And he goes, because if we die, that's how I want to go. Oh, honey, that's sweet,
But
I
yeah,
think.
but let's not let's think about moving past that. Let's think about our
Exactly.
future. Yes.
So, but then, we have like ultrasounds because, I was very like, document the baby with
Yeah.
all of the experiences I had had. And so we have one of his ultrasounds framed on the wall, and he goes, that's when I was in your tummy. And I said, yeah. And he goes, it was really dark in there. I'm like, yeah, so I've heard. And he asked me one time, he said, do you remember being in my tummy? I was like, I don't think that's how it works. You were in mine, that was it. And he goes, no, you were in my tummy and I was your mommy. I'm like, huh, maybe that's why we get along so well, is now we've kind of just role
Changed
reversaled. Or
roles. Yes.
yeah, so there's a lot of things that come up with him that, just really stop us in our tracks of like, is that
He's
what all
very connected. He's
4-year-olds
very
say?
unique. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So So yeah, lots of, and I mean, he still sleeps with me. Like my husband will sleep in our guest room, just because he's gotten so big and he like starfishes on the bed. But with us, with us now, just accepting like, okay, this is how it's going to be for now. He, all three of us sleep more solidly than ever. Once we just accepted that, it became a whole different ballgame. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I know some people are like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, but that is stereotypical, like to follow the norms and the
Mhm.
rules that are put down. This is what you should do. You don't go outside of these boundaries. You don't color outside the out of the lines. It
Right.
doesn't work. It doesn't work for everyone, and that is
No.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We joke about that a lot of like, there's been billions of kids and billions of families and all of that kind of stuff. And after we got married, I got my diagnosis of autism, and my husband got his diagnosis of bipolar type 2. And luckily, both of us had already done a ton of work and like getting in touch with ourselves. And, so we'll get these moments where I'm like, oh, I'm about to have a meltdown. And he goes, okay, like we have like this whole system. And then there are days where he's like, I'm feeling a little manic. And I'm like, okay, space for you it is, and we've kind of worked out our own. And we're like, I guarantee you there's not a parenting book out there for the autistic mom and the bipolar dad. Like it's a very,
Yeah, very
if we hadn't,
unique. But it seems though that you have figured it out.
mm,
You have
yeah,
unlocked it, and and keep going. Keep doing what you're doing because that's working and it's working for you.
yeah,
It may not work for the couple next door or someone else, but it's working for
mhm,
you, and that's all that matters because
yeah.
you guys are unique.
And so one thing that I did want to kind of go back to is that I don't know exactly what point it clicked, but there was a moment for me, um, shortly after my son had been born, that he was down on the floor and I smiled and I reached my hand out to him and I got the same image of the woman that was floating with her hand out to me and I realized that was me. She was, you know, higher self, future self, whatever, but I realized her face was me. And there's a lot of questions around that of like, okay, so was that just the face she took on to make me feel okay? Or was that literally like, through time and space or through entity or higher self or, you know, the more you get into it, the more you accept, the more questions.
Or just just so you're saying like that that person you saw was you.
Mm.
Could it not have been your son who was your mother reaching out
Right.
to you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I never even thought it totally could have been. And I do say that quite often, with the miscarriages and the ectopic and everything. Um, I do have this thought in my head that that was him, like coming down and going, "Oh, not yet. Oh, oh, not yet. Oh, sorry." And then like,
Yeah, but
like,
not him as your child, but him as when he said, "Remember when you were in my tummy?" So he was your mother, and that
yeah.
seemed like a motherly figure and touching you and being like, like having that connection. And yeah, of course when you said, yeah, when the time is right, that's when, and that's what she waited for, was the right time, or he waited for, was the right time.
And maybe that's why I haven't seen Hatman so much. It's because Sam got here and now he's kind of taken over the next stage or
This is a amazing story, Audrey. It was a roller coaster. I will say that, like, these negative kind of dark feelings into this light and, this heart, that's all I'll say. It's just full of heart is what it is. Heart and love. I do want to, I have one question though. Like when you said it all began more or less like it ramped up. It happened when you were, 3 years old, as you were told, which seems, it coincides with everything with your mom's journal, you telling her that. But at 28, what happened? What happened at 28 that it manifested into reality again? Like it formed into your reality.
And that's something that I kind of asked myself, but going back through my journals, I never really done that like in one big go. The last couple of weeks I've really been reading through and like, with my memory being like I remember emotions but not details, I was like, I kind of need the details in this. So let's see what we've got here. At that time was even though we were together for another, few years, I think the marriage I was in had already started to kind of fray at the edges. And I was feeling much more vulnerable and much more alone. And there was something about that townhome specifically, even when we were like looking at it and stuff, I did make a note of it in my journal that that place kind of felt a little different. And now I'm kind of wondering if it was, the person who had lived there before, or if there was some kind of, portal available there, or there was something about that environment specifically that kind of gave an edge to it. But like I had said, just before that, I had had my appendix out, and I had never had surgery before that or anything. I had always had just aches and pains or like a broken foot or. And in that recovery from the surgery, um, I was doing so badly on the medications. They couldn't give me any painkillers or anything because I would just throw them right up. It didn't matter what it was, what the dosage was, or anything like that. Um, and so the doctor kind of had a side eye. She told me, she's like, for a lot of my patients, is taking like a higher dose of marijuana, like a liquid marijuana that she suggested. And I had kind of smoked a little bit, party days, all of that, but I had never really like been that intoxicated. And I was taking that as my medication. So I was taking it like, every 6 hours. So I was sleeping a lot and I was not moving. I had like 3 weeks off of work. I was just in that state of kind of being between awake and between sleep. And I think maybe that was kind of like the signal of like being a little more open, being a little more vulnerable.
And
And
and you were also saying, sorry to interrupt, that
no,
when you were 3 years old, you were very vulnerable because of the separation, right? And
yeah,
that's what called him. And you're kind of saying you were feeling a little bit vulnerable again, which might have opened the door, and been like, I need you again. But also appendicitis. I'm assuming it was appendicitis. Like, what was the reason for? So appendicitis is something else as well, right? Like that is something drastic. It's not just a surgery. It's why did you have the surgery as well?
yeah.
There
And it
is.
was it was so sudden. I didn't have like a lead up to being sick. It was like I felt totally fine. And then one night I was like kind of crampy and I was like, I just had that. I can't have, it's not already my cycle. That's kind of weird. And then it was just like increasing, increasing. And then by 5 a.m. that night, it was like it started at 9 o'clock. And then by 5 a.m., I was in the ER getting surgery. It was like, and they said that it had burst and that I didn't have like a lead up of pain to it or anything. It was just totally out of the blue. Um, and yeah, and I like to think I take care of myself, like at that point, I was already doing yoga as my exercise. So maybe that was another factor of kind of opening up those kind of channels in my body, um, possibly chakra clearing or kind of getting in that space where I could accept seeing something. Maybe I had been seeing them, all the time. And I just, like I said, that frequency hadn't clicked or, there's a lot of factors in and of that time. And there was a lot of things were coming to a head. So with that marriage, I was feeling, even though I was with him, I was feeling extremely lonely. And he had started kind of retreating and isolating himself and playing a lot of, online video games. So that was our routine was we would go to work, we'd come home, we'd eat dinner, he would play video games, and I would kind of just float around. And, I had people at work that I talked to, but friends are hard. And, like it, especially at that time, all of my friends were living in Durango. So I had lived there before when I was 23 and kind of kept those friends with me up to that point. And I hadn't really made any more friends when I was living in Denver. And so it was very extremely lonely. And yeah, yeah, absolutely. Which is why, I told you I started getting into be a karaoke DJ. That was this kind of outlet. I loved singing. I'm not really great at it, but I'm good enough for karaoke. And it was something that I really loved to do and kind of express myself. So when the opportunity came up to be doing that, 4 or 5 times a week, I really jumped at it because I was like, oh, I'm going to meet so many friends. Like that was kind of the motivation behind it. Um, so yeah, there was a lot of isolation and a lot of, there was that physical pain that was going with my emotional pain of knowing that something wasn't right in that marriage. And.
And just to kind of back this up a little bit, so
Mhm.
appendicitis, the metaphysical meaning is fear of life.
Oh,
So something to think about on that side of that as well.
yeah, yeah. And I did write about this a lot too, where when I was little, I had this clear plan and path of who and what I was going to be. And I was like, you know, I don't know where it came from or, it was my need for control at that time. And I had started studying acting when I was 6, and that was like my big, huge passion until I was 19, and that switched over to being a director and a writer. And so I went to film school and I lived in LA, and everything just. So by the time I was 25, all of those solid plans of who and what I was going to be, none of it had worked. I had tried it all. I had fought really hard for it, and I was left at 25 living back with my parents in their spare bedroom with all of like their storage. And that was when I had met my ex-husband. We got married when I was 26, and I kind of attached all of my future to that. And then at 28, that was going. And I had never really thought about my life. I had always had these plans and goals by the time I'm 30, by the time I'm 30. So here I am at 28 with nothing. And so I really did have this thought in my mind of maybe I can't see my life after 30 because that's when I die. There was that kind of in the
Ooh,
back of my
interesting. Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
And you know what? I did. Because that girl that I was when I was 28, she didn't make it to 30.
Interesting. I
Because
like that take. I really like that take. And and I've said this numerous times where, we have to let parts of ourselves die so we can grow. We have to let things that we cling on to, we have to let it die so that we can move on and grow to become something greater. It's the same
oh
thing.
yeah,
It's the same, like metaphor of the butterfly, caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Everybody knows that. But it's so true. We have to give up what we were to become what we want to be.
absolutely. Yeah, and there's that huge, you know, when I go back and read the journals, it's kind of fascinating because when I read through the journal of like my high school, it's like 90% about boys. Like there's really nothing like about me and what's happening in my life or anything. It's all about, oh, I hope he likes me kind of thing. And it's like reading a POV nonfiction. You relate to the character and you're like, oh yeah, I've been there. And then there was this moment where I was like, oh, I was there. That was me. Like, oh, it was my hand who did these things. And then like as it goes through the journals, and then once I hit, you know, talking about all of my shadows and then like those ones going away and the hope that, oh, the Hat Man's gonna go away, and then just being like, oh honey, and really having there's so much of myself now when I get further in my journals, those moments where, I would write things like, "Oh, I did this today. I'm such an idiot." Turned into, "Oh, I did this today. Isn't that so funny? I'm so cute." I'm so cute that I tripped over and hit my face on the wall instead of I'm such an idiot and a klutz. That stuff started like transforming, and you don't realize, exactly how deep that is happening. And that's one of those things, I've definitely said that to my husband now of like, if it wasn't for my hat man, I wouldn't be a good mom. I couldn't be the mom that Sam needs at all. I was angry. I was impatient. I was very self-centered. It was all about my career and what I was doing and what I needed. And then by the time that Sam came, it was like, oh, I'm so ready for this. I am so ready to be
Beautiful.
all about you. Like, what do you need, baby? And that's really what a baby needs. That's really where
I
because you don't
agree.
get,
They,
you
they
don't,
they need a mother who will mother them. Yes.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I had gone through that whole thing of mothering myself because my mom, she's great. We talk all the time. Um, but I'm very sure there were so many times for her that, we actually went to teachers and were like, should we get her tested for stuff? You keep saying that she's a different kind of kid and she doesn't really talk and she doesn't socialize with the other kids. Like, is there something else going on here that we need to make sure she's okay? And we were actually literally told that autism doesn't happen in girls. So you don't have to worry about it.
I remember that as well. I remember hearing that as well.
Right. So it wasn't, I was always the weird, shy one. My mom was even asked when I was 3 years old if I was mute because we would go to church and we had been there for like a year and no one had heard me talk. I'm like, that's not a normal 3-year-old behavior. Like she was trying and there was a lot of, teacher meetings and principal meetings and when I was a kid, I would talk about these dreams, and I'm sure, she drew my shadow man. She drew my my hat man, so she knew, but she couldn't actually know. So when I got my diagnosis at 37, and when that happened, she was like, "Dang it, I knew it!" There was all of this stuff that just kind of fell into place, and yeah, so there was those gaps and those parts that I had to figure out for myself. I had to identify those things. And it went from me being like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I fit in? And it became, I would actually, when I very first started all of my work, I would picture myself just after one of my dance classes. I was trying to be a ballerina when I was 4. And I started picturing her in her little purple tutu. And when I was really upset, I would see her and I'd go, come here, honey. And I would just imagine her crawling in my lap and just holding her. And that became such a visceral experience for me in my meditations and, when I was really upset. And, depression has kind of been this back and forth for me. And, but it always came back to her. So then when I had my little person and he's upset, it wasn't, shut up, you're being so stupid. It was, come here, baby. I know exactly what to do because I did this for me.
Ah, that is brilliant. I love that. And Audrey, we're getting close here to the end, and I have one last question
Yeah.
before we end this. And I know your grandpa hadn't passed before the Hat Man came, but do you feel that your grandpa maybe played a part in guiding the Hat Man because he seemed to be there when you needed him? When he was there. Do you feel that
Yeah.
maybe he was working in the background with them, or I don't know?
I I do know that from, my mother's journals and things, that by the time the Hat Man was showing up, my grandfather knew that he was terminally ill, that he had cancer. So there was that year period where we were living with him and kind of helping with him, and he was in the nursing home and, all of that kind of stuff. There was also when I was 15, my cousin, we grew up like sisters and she passed away suddenly. She got caught in a rip tide in the river and drowned. And after that, I would dream about her. And like it was like stuff where she like cut her hair and and she wouldn't really talk, but we would always, it was always these really intense things. So when I started seeing the Hat Man, I actually would write letters to her. And it was a very like intense kind of dialogue between, myself and imagining it was her. But now, I do wonder that. I do think about that of if they can't quite get to me at times, but he has the ability, and they're all kind of, they talk about Galactic Federation or they talk about guardian angels, all of these things kind of, I think about it a lot and I wonder a lot, and a lot of that I just kind of, especially now that, Sam's getting older and everything, all opening up to that and, kind of getting into that, all right, if I've got gifts, let's see, he's starting preschool. I've got 6 hours a day where I'm just wondering.
Yes. Yeah, I
So,
agree.
yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Well, Audrey, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your stories. That it was really wonderful, really amazing. So thank you so much. And is there anything you want to plug before we go, or anything at all?
Um, I'm just kind of starting this next phase. Um, and I'm just really excited about that. I don't really, I have a book
Okay,
written, but it's all fiction.
there we go.
I haven't tried to publish or anything. Just, you know, weird lady with a weird story. Well, and I say that
Very
proudly.
Yes, exactly. Say that proudly for sure. Well, Audrey, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate, having an outlet. Like, this is so cool. I've never really talked about it in public and anything. So
Well,
thank you.
here we go. Jump in. Yes,
All right. Yeah, deep in first.
exactly. Thank you so much, Audrey. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. That was Audrey. And I want to say thank you so much for sharing her story. It takes a lot to do that. It really does, especially if it's your first time and sharing it publicly as well. Like she did when she was in those conferences. But this is, I think, a little bit different. So, like shadow figures, the Hat Man, and the things that are lurking just beyond our understanding, whether they're protectors or warnings or something else entirely. One thing's for sure, encounters like these, they leave a lasting mark. And I've personally experienced that. So, like, hearing the story tonight really makes you wonder how much of what we experience is really just in our minds, or how much is something real, watching and waiting. Maybe the answers aren't as simple as we'd like them to be. So, thanks for everyone for tuning in and exploring the unknown with me. Until next time, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wonder why, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codega flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, battle against flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering in the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the Earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering in the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home. Giants, cryptids that call